Welcome back to the Imaginary Gallery. Tonight's discussion is C.P.T.S.D. Now, as you all know, I rarely get into clinical terms, but this one I figured was probably worth discussing because you know what PTSD is, post traumatic stress disorder, and you hear about that mainly with men who have gone to war and watched their friends and whoever die and killed as well, and it's like a horrifying thing, so that when they come back to reality and maybe they're at the 4th of July firework display and they hear all the pows and the whatevers and they become seized into some kind of frenzy of post-traumatic stress disorder. Well, for the narcissist or narcopathic or cluster bead, we won't say victims, but targets, they experience something very similar to this. Yet, it's got the extra letter C because it's not just traumatic or post-traumatic stress disorder, because with the research I did, post-traumatic stress disorder is basically based on a short-lived situation. Like they're overseas doing the war, 10 people die and they go home. It's a short. But with the narcissistic cluster B monster blah blah whatever, with them it's a much longer time period. And that's why they call it complex, because it's not just based on seeing your friends die, having to kill, and getting shot or whatever. It's way more. Which I'm learning this stuff too. But I try to relate this to my own experience as a previous target to such abuse. And the way I see it is what's happened on a few occasions is that after I had gone away from that 11-year thing, I would be receptive to meeting new people. And during this situation, I found myself noticing various things that just didn't add up quite right. But what did I do? I went ahead and pursued, because I figured, you know what? I'm all screwed up, so what I thought was bad might not be, and whatever. And that's, of course, the perfect target for one of these cluster B people. Someone who is like already pre-abused, so they can be like re-abused, which again, I had no clue that even existed then. I think, how could you take someone who's already abused and abuse them again? Because that's based on thinking that they're equals, like they have empathy and care for others. They don't. So instead it's, well, you're the perfect target for me because you've already been abused, you know the language. But anyway, and I will choose from many of my experiences. I started out as a skeptic as I was getting involved with the new person. And I would listen to all the flattery and all the compliments and think, you know what? I would even say, you know what? That's fake. You don't feel that way. But the point of this was that I began in a cynical manner. But then time passed, and there were like regular nights of the week that I was together with the person. So after a while, it seemed to be like, well, maybe this is different than the other things I've gone through. But I didn't realize, of course, that I was being monitored and watched. of my one of my previous experiences, I had already been through the whole thing with someone else who pretended to be Jesus, but was really the devil, and then had to reconcile all that in my brain. But after such an occurrence with a monster that's obviously a monster, you meet somebody new, and of course they're saying, "Oh, I'm nothing like that. Oh, I'd never be like that." Well, in your or my situation, you've heard it all before. So you're not necessarily going to take anyone's word for it that whatever they say is real. Because you can't, because that's how you got to where you are. So what I would do is, I believe there were two factors at work simultaneously, which one of them would be the dealing with a person who goes from the love bomb or idealization phase all the way through to the discard phase. For the human brain, that's very traumatic to deal with someone who at first just can't get enough of you so much that you want to push them away a little bit to all of a sudden you don't exist anymore. And that's just not a normal transition in any kind of a relationship with someone, because normally if you have a really good friend, maybe later on you're not quite as good of a friend and it fluctuates downward just a little. But this is like completely the opposite. It's you're 100% perfect, the one they want to be with forever, and then eventually discarded, and you're not anything at all to them, and the brain has trouble processing how you could go from so wonderful, which felt kind of awkward to begin with, and then to be non-existent. Plus, in my situation, on top of it was I was already aware of such things, so I was looking out for that. And internally, I allowed myself to eventually get closer and closer and closer to the person, giving in to their gaslighting that I am being too strict based on my own experiences previously. I should give this person a chance. So I went through my own personal journey of overstepping those boundaries I had before, thinking, well, how will I ever move anywhere forward if I don't give someone else a chance? And then, of course, they turned out to do the exact same thing. So you've already been through it. It was already traumatic. And then you tiptoed into a new thing, suspicious. And, of course, it turns out the suspicions were all accurate. But you did not, or I did not know that at the time. So by the time I realized it, it was complex post-traumatic stress to realize, oh my goodness, I told this person exactly what I went through, and this person dragged me right through it again. So it's very complex, because it's not like a quick thing that happens fast. It's something that goes very slow over time. And in my situation, I had made allowances for the person, let the person closer and closer and closer, and then found out that this is another one of those. And it's very it's very traumatic, because I wanted to believe that this new person had good intentions, and slowly tiptoed into allowing it to be closer and closer, only to find the very same situation that I experienced before. And like I said before, it's just not normal for someone to put you at number one and then put you at number zero, and it takes a toll on your mind, because you want to think that you've learned from your experience, and you've learned not to deal with such people, but then here you are again with another one. And it's traumatic, because you feel yourself going through your own personal journey, overcoming this, overcoming that, welcoming the person closer and closer, and finding out that they're just like the others. And they'll gaslight you along the way if you say, hey, this feels a lot like that last person I was with. And they'll be quick to tell you, don't you dare compare me to that person, even though I'm doing the same stuff they did. And that is very stressful and traumatic for the brain to handle, because your own personal journey, you've opened yourself up to allow the person in closer, and then you reveal what the person's really about, and you just think, you know what, this is a cosmic joke. I'm being set up with one after another person who does not have my best interests in mind. Complex. And lasting over a long period of time. It's sometimes described as a hit and run relationship, which I think defines it pretty well, because somebody shows up and hits you and they jump into your life and they want to be there for everything for you, and then later they're gone. And again, that's just not something the human brain can handle or understand, because it so defies the normal reality. Because in your situation, you probably don't meet someone and immediately love them and want to be with them every minute of the day, and then a week later can't stand them. That's just two opposite of extremes. But that's the idea I have with this subject, and would welcome your comments and would love to hear your side as far as your experience. So like, subscribe, and share below.